Okay friends, it's going to be time to get started on our window motor. That's going to be located behind the door panel, so there's going to be a few things that we have to remove before we can even get the door panel off of the door. Let's start all the way up at the top at the mirror switch. For the mirror switch, there's going to be two locking tabs, one up along the top right here and one on this inside portion. To get this off, it's going to be fairly easy using a nice small screwdriver. When you do this, you want to be very careful not to scratch up your door panel. Just get it in there, gently start prying. If you want to use a trim tool, you can also use that. Once you start prying on it a little bit, it should want to pop free. So I'll just carefully get this in here, work my way along that other side, push on that one a little bit, and we can pop it right out of here. Behind that switch, you're going to find a wiring harness. On one side of the wiring harness, you're going to find that you have a black tab that comes through this area. That's part of the locking mechanism. I'll use my small screwdriver, carefully put it in between and gently pry. While I'm doing that, I'm going to try to separate the wiring from the switch itself. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, give it a quick inspection. If you see any funny colors where the terminal ends are, it's probably corrosion and that would need to be dealt with. I'll take this wire and I'm going to carefully slide it inside the door panel. Next, we're going to make our way down to the window switch area. This is a plastic trim panel that you can carefully pop up and away. Behind that, there's going to be some wiring. Keep that in mind. To remove the wiring, I'm going to continue on with my small pocket screwdriver. On each of the wiring harnesses, you're going to find that you have a rectangular tab that you'd want to carefully pry against and then separate the wiring from each of these ports. Quick inspection, move along. Let's set this aside. We're going to be reusing it, so don't put it too far away. Go ahead and carefully put the wires down in here. Now we're going to move along to this area. We have a nice black handle that's here, but behind it, you're going to find that you have a rectangular trim panel. Go ahead and use your small screwdriver and carefully remove that trim panel. We'll have a look from the back side. You can see that there's 4 locking tabs and 2 locating pins. Keep that in mind for during the installation process. Once you have the panel out of the way, you're going to want to have a look underneath this handle. You're going to find 2 7mm headed bolts. Go ahead and remove the pair. A little stuck in there. Now once you have those out of there, let's continue down to where the inside door handle is. Around that door handle, you're going to find that you have another trim piece. Go ahead and carefully remove that. Pull on that handle and slide it right out of the hole. Now it's time to move underneath the door panel. Under here, you're going to find 2 5.5mm screws. Remove them. Once you have everything unbolted, continue on with your trim tool. You want to carefully get in between the door panel and the door itself. Once you get it in between there, just gently start prying. You're going to hear some popping because there's a whole bunch of push pins that make their way around the door. Once you have it broken free from the door, carefully grab onto it. Of course, you want to be very careful for any pinch points, but we're just going to lift it right on up and off of here. Go ahead and set that aside. Next, we're going to start removing the inside door handle from the door itself. To do that, you just want to carefully grab onto the foam and we'll gently pull it away. Behind that foam, you're going to end up finding 2 Phillips head screws, one down in this corner, and there's another one up on the opposite corner. Remove the pair. Once you have those off of there, you're going to grab onto the inside door handle. I want to essentially slide it towards the door speaker. It's going to come unlatched right along this area. There we are. Now we'll just carefully start pulling it out of the door. Behind that, you're going to find the door handle rod. That leads all the way across the door to the door latch. We don't have to worry so much about that part, but we do need to remove the rod from the inside handle. To get this off of here, I'm going to go ahead and pull it away, hold the rod up against the door. Now all I want to do is carefully start lifting up on this and twisting it so the handle starts facing down. And then I can go ahead and pull it right off of the rod. Now you can carefully let go of that rod. It's okay if it falls into the door. We'll deal with that later. The next thing that we want to do is take off the weather barrier along here. Now when you do this, you want to be very careful not to rip it because you do need to reuse it. I'll carefully pull the wiring out through this hole and then just keep on pulling it away. You don't have to fully remove it, just get it so it's far enough away, approximately like this. Now with that out of the way, we have a clear view of some of our window regulator. The window regulator is where the motor is going to be located, approximately in this area right here. Obviously you can't see the motor from this perspective, so we're going to have to remove the entire regulator and then remove the motor from it. Now it's time to grab onto that window switch. We're going to have to reattach it to the wires. Once we do that, we'll put the key in the on position and we're going to go ahead and function the window so it starts coming down a little bit. While it comes down, the two areas that we want to pay attention to is this hole right here and this hole over here. While we're looking inside there, we're waiting to find the mounting hardware that holds the window to the regulator. It's plugged in. We got green, blue, gray. Put the key in the on position. Now that I have the key in the on position, I'm going to carefully start bringing this down. Before I start bringing it down, there's some safety information to mention. You want to make sure you don't have your hands inside here. Of course, when this comes down, you don't want to be in any pinch points. Aside from that, you have this rod that's just kind of floating around. You don't want that getting caught either. With everything free and clear, let's go ahead and start lowering it down, paying attention inside each of these holes for our mounting hardware. Once it's lined up, make sure you take the key out of the on position. We want to make sure there's no way that this is going to move while our fingers are inside. Now looking through this hole right here, typically you're going to find mounting hardware. It'll either be a rivet of some sort or a nut and a bolt. If it's a rivet, you're going to have to go ahead and cut it out of there, either with a drill or even a cutting wheel. There isn't very much room for a cutting wheel, but typically with a drill you can drill it right out. For us in particular, it looks as though somebody's replaced this, so I'll continue on with a wrench that fits on the bolt and a socket that fits on the nut. This looks like it's still in good condition, so I'll set it aside so I can reuse it for the installation process. Now at this point, you're going to want to have some tape. For the tape, we're going to go ahead and take the window and slide it all the way up here. Once it's in the fully upright position, continue on applying the tape to the window. Essentially, all we want to do is make it so the window will stay in the upright position while we continue. Keep in mind, glass is fragile and expensive. Tape is cheap. Go ahead and use as much as you feel as though you need. You don't want the glass to fall down while we work. Once you have the window safely taped in the upright position, we're going to go ahead and put the key in the on position. We want to put the window regulator down. The top of the area of the window regulator right here needs to make its way down to the lower aspect, essentially so it's fully compressed. With that in the fully compressed position, let's continue on to these two 11mm headed nuts. Remove the pair. We'll grab this, we'll give it a little wiggle, and you're going to want to watch the studs fall out of their corresponding holes. Now let's make our way over this way. Right here, you're going to find one more 11mm headed nut. We'll wait on loosening this until we move along to the other three areas right here. Commonly, these will be rivets. Once again, cut them, drill them, whatever you have to do. Once they're out of the way, we'll continue on up here. Ours are 10mm headed nuts with a 10mm headed bolt on the back side. Now, before we continue on to our last 11mm headed nut, let's move down to the wiring. For this, I'm going to use a small pocket screwdriver. Along the top of this, there's a tab. I'll gently pry and separate the wiring right here. This is what leads down to the motor itself. Give both sides a quick inspection, and then go ahead and slide this right into the door. Let's move along to removing our last nut. Just keep in mind, as you remove this, there's nothing else holding the window regulator and the motor inside the door, so it could potentially fall down. Watch out for any pinch points. Just going to hold that. Now let's go ahead and separate this, and then we can start removing it from the door. Now with that out of there, we have a clear view of the motor on the regulator. Let's bring it over to the bench so we can start removing it. Now we're over on the bench here, and the next thing that I always like to do is use a little bit of tape. Typically electrical tape works fine. I'm going to come right around the arms here and just tape them together. This is essentially just a safety precaution. Once you have the safety tape on there, we're going to continue on to removing the motor from the regulator. You want to have it in the position that you can see all of the mounting hardware. For ours in particular, I'm going to use a Phillips head screwdriver. While I do this, I'm going to be extremely careful. There's always the possibility that something might shift and something might end up pinching your fingers in some way. So just keep all that in mind. Safety is paramount. Okay, while I'm doing this, I'm keeping my fingers away from the gears. Now all I'm going to do is carefully grab onto the motor, and I'm going to lift it up and away. There it is, friends. Okay, now it's time to get ready to install our brand new window motor. Let's take that window motor and make sure there's a little bit of lubricant on all of the cogs here and on some of the cogs along here. That's going to help make sure everything functions properly and you don't have to worry about any rust. Next, we're going to go ahead and start lining up the teeth of the motor with the cog on the window regulator. Once you get it on there, we're also going to start lining up our 3 mounting bolt holes. Okay, now I'm just going to twist it. Once I have all 3 of the holes lined up, I'm going to carefully turn this over. Once again, we're being extremely careful for any pinch points. There's always the possibility something could happen with the tape, and the spring on this could potentially make something happen. Now we can start putting in all of our mounting bolts. All I'm going to do here is start in each of them. Once each of them are started, we can go ahead and snug them. We're just going to make sure each of these mounting bolts is nice and tight. That looks good. Let's get this in the vehicle. Now I'm just going to hold everything together and I'll fully remove my tape from the area. Set that aside. Let's go ahead and take the unit and carefully put it inside the door. While we're doing that, be extremely careful not to damage your wiring. Now I'm going to line up my alignment stud right with this hole right here, slide it right on through, and start my 11mm nut on. Now that that's started on, I'm going to continue on with my other 3 mounting studs. I'm going down for the bottom corner here, hopefully. We'll start in all the rest before we tighten anything down. Now that I have them all started, I'll use my wrench and my socket and snug them up. The next thing I want to do is carefully reach my hand inside the door, and I'm going to start bringing the wiring out through this upper hole right here. After that, I'll go ahead and connect it in. When you go to connect in the wiring, you want to have it in this orientation. Up along the top should have the flat ridge with the locking tab on it. Once it's in there, go ahead and give it a little tug to make sure it's completely secured. Now let's carefully reach inside here. We want to pay attention to this crossbar. You also want to pay attention to your door handle rod. It's important to make sure it's sitting up high just like this. If you can get it to stay inside this rectangle, that's going to work out perfectly for you. Once it's up there, let's continue on with this cross rod. We're going to line up our mounting studs with their corresponding holes and then start on each of our 11mm nuts. Now that they're both started, tighten them up. Now we're going to move along to the top cross rod. This is the one that the window is going to mount to. For this rod, you can carefully take it and slide it into the proper position. I have my mounting hole here. I remember when I disassembled everything, I need to actually gain access through this hole. Carefully grab onto it and slide it into the closest position. Now we're going to go ahead and put the key in the on position. Once again, do not put your hands anywhere inside the door while you're functioning the window regulator or motor. Let's go ahead and bring this up so we can line up our mounting hole. That looks pretty good. Now before I continue on, I'm going to make sure that I go ahead and power off the car. The next thing we want to do is carefully hold pressure on the window. After that, continue on by removing all of your safety tape. Now I'm going to carefully start bringing this down. While I'm bringing it down, there's a couple things that I want to pay attention to. Down along the bottom, where the window is supposed to connect onto the regulator, needs to line up. But as I'm bringing it down, I want to make sure I bring it down as straight as possible, essentially keeping it inside the window channel. Now I'm going to continue on bringing this down, paying attention to where the window connects onto the regulator. Now that I have it lined up, I'm going to continue on with my mounting bolt and nut. Once you have both of the areas for the mounting hardware started, go ahead and tighten them up. Okay, we're at the point that we're going to have to test everything. Before we put the key in the on position, I want to re-mention, for safety's sake, do not put anything, including your hands, inside the door while you're functioning the window regulator. Go ahead and put the key in the on position. Come over to your switch, and we're going to start trying the window. I want to make sure it comes down, and of course, all the way back up. Assuming it functions properly, we can continue on. Perfect. All right, now continue on by taking your key out of the on position and put it on the dash. After that, we're going to continue by removing all of our wiring from our window switch again. Now it's time to start reinstalling our inside door handle. Looking at the side, there's a couple little grooves. Pay attention to those because once we put this in, it needs to line up with this area. It's going to slide right in. Before we worry too much about that, we're going to continue on to the rod. That needs to fit inside the corresponding hole on the door handle. When you go to install this, we want to have it so the handle's facing down. There we are. Just inspect it, make sure it's completely situated in there. Now I'm going to take this, I'm going to pull it far this way, push it into the door. It should slide right in. Once it feels as though it's slid in, I'll continue by forcing it to this point. Now once it latches in, continue on to your two mounting screws, one in this corner, one on the top. Once you get each of them started, snug them up. Go ahead and stick that to the door. Now it's time for the weather barrier. I'm going to reach through the rectangular hole, grab my wiring, and go ahead and carefully pull it right on through. Once I have it through, I'll bring it into its proper position. You can tell where there's a slot for it. Go ahead and take that and make sure it's behind the handle here. Now we're just going to take this and we're going to stretch it all the way across so it's a nice straight line. It should want to line up with its original position, making sure that all of the mounting holes for the push pins are lined up properly. Speaking of push pins, inspect each of the holes. Make sure you don't have any push pins left inside the door. If you do, continue on with your trim tool and pop them out of there. Have a look at the back of your door panel. Inspect each of the areas where the push pins should be. If any of them are missing, go ahead and put them in there. Looking at the push pin, you can see that there's a double layer here. You want to have the door panel right inside that slot. I'll line it up, lock it in. Check all the rest and get ready for our installation. Now we can start putting the door panel on here. I have it backwards because I want to show you a couple things. Right along here is a ridge. That ridge needs to fit up along the top of the door. Aside from that, you also have your door lock hole right up along the top here. You want to make sure as you're bringing this down, it's going to line up with the door lock knob. Super important. That's going to be easiest if you have this in the unlocked position, up. Now while I bring this over here, I'm also going to start dealing with the wiring. This wire right here is for the mirror. I'm going to take that and I'm going to put it up and through the mirror switch hole. Now I'll continue on with my other 3 wires. They're going to come right up and through the handle hole here. Let's start bringing this up and putting it into position. While I'm doing this, I'm going to have it at an angle. I want to have the top closest to the door and the lower aspect pulled away. I'll start bringing that door lock through the hole here. At the same time, I'm pushing the top up against the door and sliding it down. I'm going to give it a little bonk just to make sure it's completely situated. Now we're going to pay attention all the way along the door panel in the door. You want to make sure each one of those push pins lines up with their corresponding hole. As you're gently pressing it in, they should line up, and then you can go ahead and give it a bonk to drive it in. You want to make sure that it's contacting the door and it's not hanging off in any way. Time to install the mirror switch. Looking at the backside where the wiring is, you can tell that you have this area that protrudes out a little bit. Looking at the wiring, you can see that there's a little piton that also protrudes out a little bit. Line it up, click it in. Give it a tug to make sure it's completely situated. Put your mirror switch in the proper positioning, with this facing up. Go ahead and slide it right in there and latch it in. Double check it. Move along to your window switch. We'll start connecting in all of our wiring harnesses all the way down, and then we're going to start putting this into the door panel. You're going to see that you have 2 push clips that you need to align with their proper holes and then latch it in. Now we'll continue on to our 7mm headed mounting bolts. Each of those go into these holes. Start them in, snug them up. Now we can put on our rectangular protective cover. Looking at the back side, the lettering is going to be upside down, but you can see that there's an arrow that faces up this way and it says top. Press that in there. Let's continue on to this piece. Pull on that door handle, slide it right on through the hole. Now we'll go ahead and line everything up and press it in. Time for our 2 5.5mm lower screws. Okay, we've got it put back together. Go ahead and put the key in the on position, double check to make sure all the windows function properly and your door locks. Thanks for watching.